Steroids. We work hard and play harder.
And that's just the goal with the Sharp Football Analysis podcast, is to discover and uncover new ways to analyze football, and then share that information and disseminate that material in an easy to understand manner. And then at that point, all you got to do is let the Marshawn Lynch principle take over. Yeah, that is, when we do it so constantly, so frequently, and so repetitively, and so accurately, even those who hate analytics, even the cynics and the skeptics, it just will click in their mind that they're so worn down and frustrated they will have to sit down and listen to reason. And that is the Marshawn Lynch principle. Because like he says,
if you just run through somebody's face, a lot of people ain't gonna be able to take that over and 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 over again. They just not gonna want that.
Think there's a deeper metaphor there?
Run through a face, then you don't have to worry about them no more.
Welcome into the Week 4 edition of the Sharp Football Analysis Podcast. My name is Warren Sharp of SharpFootballAnalysis.com, and we're going to be joined momentarily by Evan Silva of RotoWorld.com, and we're going to break down the games like we always do for you guys on this late Friday evening edition of the podcast. I do want to address a couple of housekeeping notes. We've been rolling with the Sharp Football Show the last 2 Mondays. Evan joined us this past week, and we broke some games down from an analytical perspective to give you guys a jump start on the week ahead. So make sure you guys are tuning in every single Monday night, live on Periscope, 8 p.m. before the games start. Now, the Whiteboard Wednesday podcast, we didn't hit that up this week. I had a death in the family, so we didn't roll with that one this week. But every Wednesday, I'm going to be recording a video of me directing you through this cool website called sharpfootballstats.com. It's going to really help you guys get some visualizations about the upcoming games and where teams rank in certain metrics and different matchup edges and that type of thing visually. The other thing I wanted to mention before we start diving into these Week 4 games is that on Sharp Football Stats this very week, I added a pretty cool feature, which is the strength of schedule. And you can actually look at in-season numbers, how these teams visually see how they've done in terms of strength of schedule, of who they've played, where their schedule up-to-date ranks, what their schedule ranks just for the future moving forward. You can sort it by different metrics, so you can see how strong a team is versus their opponents, run defense, pass efficiency, yards per pass, yards per point. A lot of different metrics you can choose from and see how good their upcoming opponents do in those various metrics, and kind of get a gauge as to which team. And we're going to talk about it, actually. Evan and I, there's a couple games we've circled that are going to be perfectly set up for talking about the road that a team has faced the first 3 weeks, and then boom, all of a sudden Week 4 is here. Their schedule is going to change very quickly in this upcoming game, and those are some things that we can key in on for performance this week that you may not have seen year to date thus far. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in and bring on Evan Silva. You can follow Evan on Twitter at Evan Silva. He writes the matchups column every single week over at RotoWorld.com. It's a tremendous resource. Gives you guys breakdowns of every single matchup, every single player that's important, relevant whatsoever from the fantasy world. And I encourage you to follow him on Twitter to get all of his in-week content, and definitely don't miss the matchups article every single week. Evan, how are you doing Friday evening? Are you getting ready for these games? We finally have a couple of bye weeks, but it's not going to be quite as bad as we're going to get here in the next few weeks ahead after this one when more teams are going on byes.
Yeah, I'm super excited as usual. Friday night it really starts to set in that the games are approaching, and then Saturday is just kind of waiting for Saturday to end, and then it's here, man. That was fun last Monday too, doing the show. We talked about how Fleener might have a big game, and he did. The Saints were unable to, of course, pull the game out, but it wound up being super high scoring as expected, and we saw Fleener kind of get off the schneid. He was terrible in the Saints' first 2 games, although he was getting open, and Breeze just missed him a couple times, but they were able to hook up a lot, and hopefully they can get their chemistry or their rapport together moving forward.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It's Drew Brees needs a guy like that, and of course the big problem, and one of the reasons why I was on Atlanta plus the points in that game was primarily because Drew Brees was without Willie Snead, his number 1 wide receiving option. Mm-hmm. And with the defense as beat up as his was heading into this game, like his offense needed that efficiency to stay out on the field a little bit more. They needed the ability to score a little bit quicker if they needed. And he and Snead have just produced a tremendous rapport and performance together so far this year, and losing him is definitely, I think, a key part of the reason why they certainly played well. Obviously, they put up the number of points that they did. They played well, but their defense just could not stop the run of Atlanta, and they struggled from that respect. But yeah, that show every single Monday night from 8 o'clock Eastern time heading up to kickoff is something that hopefully people will continue to tune into, because it's fun putting it together. It's fun kind of looking ahead at some of the upcoming games, even though it's still early in the week before Monday night has come. So what Evan and I have done usually, this is standard, we circle a few games that we want to go ahead and break down for you guys, and we go ahead and talk about, introduce the game based on the betting line. And right now we've got the Washington Redskins hosting the Cleveland Browns. And these two teams, one of them was good last year and went to the playoffs. The other one was obviously not. And this year, that team, the Washington Redskins, had a bad start to the year as well. And they're sitting at 1-2, and Cleveland's sitting at 0-3. This game actually opened with the Redskins laying 10 points, and the total 45.5. That total has now moved up to 47. And the money has come in on Cleveland, taking the dog down to 7.5. So I'll go ahead and toss it over to you, Evan, to go ahead and lay out some of your initial views on this, and then I'll share mine, and then we can go back and forth before we jump ahead to the next game on the board. What do you think about this particular matchup? First, I'll throw a curveball because I know you like the Redskins, like Kirk Cousins' abilities here. Talk to me about Cleveland before you do talk Redskins. Tell me what to expect out of Kessler in this game and how they're going to use Pryor.
Yeah, so Cody Kessler, I think, was a little bit better than I expected, a little better than I think most people expected in his first game. But, you know, we often see quarterbacks have some initial success, and then, you know, there's a full game tape on them, and, you know, defensive coordinators are able to work with that and understand a player's strengths and weaknesses and attack the weaknesses. And I think that if there was one weakness with Cody Kessler, it was that he locked on to Terrell Pryor. I mean, Terrell Pryor accounted for over 40% of Cody Kessler's pass targets in week 3 and nearly 60% of his receiving yardage. At the same time, and Drew Dinkmeyer of Roto Experts, he kind of came up with this idea or this thought process that the Browns are essentially running sort of like a high school offense, where they are just trying to get the ball to their best player constantly, you know, and just letting this one dude, you know, just feeding him the rock. I mean, Terrell Pryor lined up at quarterback on 12 plays last week. They were running him in the goal line, you know, running him out of the shotgun, letting him make throws. He actually made a couple of pretty difficult throws in tight windows last week. I mean, he's never going to be a full-time NFL quarterback, but I mean, he is a special athlete. I mean, he's the best athlete on the field. You know what I mean? Like, it stands out with Terrell Pryor. He's the best athlete on the field when he's on the field. And I think that they'll continue to do that. Corey Coleman, the number 15 overall pick, he's out 3 to 5 more weeks. Josh Gordon is not coming back at this point. And, I mean, I think they're going to make Terrell Pryor the focal point of their offense, just try to feed him touches as a runner, as a receiver, as a as a quarterback, throwing the ball, 4, 5, 6 times a game. And then the Redskins came out today and they said that they are not going to use Josh Norman, who, by the way, kind of got his lunch eaten last week by Odell Beckham. Eli actually had some missed opportunities against Josh Norman where, there was one play in the second half where Odell Beckham got open against Norman for a would-be 90-yard touchdown, and Eli threw it to Sterling Shepard instead. But the Redskins came out and said that they are not going to use Josh Norman to shadow Terrell Pryor in coverage, and that should be concerning for the Redskins that they're not doing that, because the rest of their secondary is wiped out. They lost D'Angelo Hall to a torn ACL last week. Their second corner, Bashaud Breeland, who Antonio Brown ate up in week 1, but is really a good corner. He suffered a high ankle sprain. That's a multi-week injury. And they lost their slot corner, Deshaun Phillips. He's not going to play. So they're going to be leaning on a ton of backups here to try to and they're just going to, it looks like they're just going to leave Josh Norman at left cornerback. And, that's a little work. Terrell Pryor could have another big game. I think he's got a shot at another big game. I think this game has kind of sneaky shootout potential. I like the Redskins side too. The Browns are bad on defense. They dating back to last season, they've given up multiple touchdown passes in 11 of their last games. They don't get a lot of pressure on the quarterback. The run defense has been okay, but we saw Kirk Cousins take a step forward last week. You talked about it. They kind of balanced out the offense. It was 37 called passes to 30 called runs. Matt Jones, he's never going to be a super dynamic runner, but he can move the chains and put the offense in, third and shorts or second and shorts. And so that was good to see. And Kirk Cousins was just a more controlled player last week. And just seemed more comfortable in a road game. And now he gets to go back home and face a bad defense at home. And Ray Horton, the Browns defensive coordinator, kind of described what the Browns are doing this year on defense. They are trying to play as many players as they can. They have a ton of young players, and they're trying to play as many players as they can. They're not really using many guys as full-time players, and because they're just trying to figure out what they have in all these guys, and trying to find players that maybe they can sign to cheap extensions down the road. Just trying to find good players, and I don't think they're going to be out there like scheming to stop Jordan Reed, which has been an issue for the Redskins early in the year. And I think that this has been one of the primary reasons that the Redskins have struggled so much in the red zone is because defenses have been, boxing out Jordan Reed, using bracket cover against him. And Kirk Cousins to throw the ball to Jamison Crowder, who's 5'8", 5'9", in the red zone, and that's always going to be, a negative EV expected value move. It's just a big difference throwing the ball in the red zone in tight quarters to Jordan Reed versus feeding red zone targets to Jamison Crowder. So I don't think the Browns are going to be trying to take away Jordan Reed in the red zone this week. I think that they're more worried about finding good players in their defense and not really scheming to stop one specific player. And I think that Jordan Reed kind of breaks out of his funk this week, and I think that Kirk Cousins has a chance at a big day.
Well, you're checking off a lot of the boxes, to use a phrase of yours. Checking off a lot of the boxes of things that I like about this game as well. So let's break it down. First of all, though, one thing that you mentioned but didn't really criticize too hardly, and I'll go ahead and lay the lumber here. What are the Redskins doing, giving away their defensive game plans days before they're actually about to play their opponent? I mean, this has to be the stupidest tactic that a team can do, is to publicly, to the media, tell them what they're going to do with their biggest free agent acquisition of the offseason. And I have to feel like it's some type of they feel guilty that they got talked about so much for not having Josh Norman shadow Antonio Brown all over the field week one, and they're kind of like just a child at a kindergarten who feels so bad that they got in trouble. Now they're just going to start tattletaling and ratting out everybody on the playground. I saw this guy do that. And the Redskins now are just feel guilty that they didn't maybe use him in the most ideal scenario that the press thought that they should. So now they want to tell him what we're going to do just so that we don't get any criticism after the game for it. I mean, it's
do you think that Bill Belichick would ever give away his defensive game plan to the media?
Exactly. It is by far the most, we're talking about high school football here. This is by far the most high school football move of the season, and we've seen it now in consecutive weeks. This is what we're going to do with our best guy, and just be prepared for it, media. This is what we're going to do. And as if they don't know that the other team is clearly hearing what you're saying, too, and can adjust accordingly. Bizarre. There's truly no other word to say it. But let's get back to, the X's and O's of this game. I 100% agree with you on the Jordan Reed angle here. I think Kirk Cousins had a lot of success when Jordan Reed was his number one guy. When they got going, it opened things for other receivers last season, and the goodness started flowing in the Redskins offense when those two finally got on the same page. And so I've just been waiting for that to happen this year. And I think finally we're to that week where I believe that this is the opportunity for that to happen. We also know that the Washington Redskins struggled against good teams last year. That was the biggest criticism of them the entire year. This team cannot beat the good teams. They'll run it up against the bad teams. They'll put 47 on the Saints defense, and they'll put 24 on the Bears and 35 on the Bills and 38 on the Eagles last year. But, against the good teams like the Green Bays and like the Patriots and like the Panthers last year, they're just not going to do it. Well, look at who they've played so far this year. So far this year, they have played the Pittsburgh Steelers, who everybody was talking could be the Super Bowl contender for the AFC. They also played the Giants and the Cowboys. We know that both of these teams, maybe not Super Bowl contenders this year, but certainly well improved over what they were last year and playing pretty good overall football considering what they've got. I mean, the Giants have a very good defense going, and the Dallas Cowboys, they're a pretty balanced team whose offense can really control things. So the fact of the matter is that this Redskins team has played three teams that all have winning records right now. When they go up against the Cleveland Browns, that's an 0-3 team. And that's a team that they should beat. That's a team that they have had a lot of success against last season. So I think that's going to be a manner and a factor that they're going to have a lot of success this year. Now, let's flip the script and talk about the Cleveland offense, because I actually think that there are some opportunities here for the Cleveland Browns offensively this week. The first thing that we have to talk about is let's discuss who they have faced defensively, because I have been very critical about the Browns rushing attack, and the Browns have been having huge chunk plays on the ground, but they really are not the type of team that's going to have a lot of success overall. Their success rate overall has not been very good. However, if you look at what they have done last week against the Miami Dolphins, they played pretty well. And the fact of the matter is, in terms of their rushing attack, very balanced, getting good yardage on some short yardage plays, having a very good overall success rate on the ground. The Washington Redskins, I know you mentioned by the overall metrics perhaps, that they do not have a terrible run defense. But here's the thing. If you look at success rate, which I've been talking about a lot this season, more so than any year past, and I don't see that changing, the success rate for the Washington Redskins run defense ranks 31st in run success defense on opponent runs inside their own territory. Basically, just to go ahead, if you guys didn't listen to the podcast last week where I described success rate, basically the Washington Redskins defense, if they have the opponent and it's 1st and 10 and the team runs the ball and they get 5 yards on 1st and 10, that is a successful play. If they got 4 yards, that would not be considered a successful play. But on a 2nd and 3, obviously 4 yards would be. So it changes based on down and distance to go, what is a successful play or not. This team on runs inside the Redskins territory ranks 31st in the NFL. But check out this number. 62% of opponent runs are successful. It's ridiculously bad, and it's well worse than the average, which is 45%. Now, the Browns faced the Dolphins, they faced the Ravens, and they faced the Eagles. In that very same metric, opponent run success inside their territory, these teams rank number 1, number 3, and number 6. So the fact that Cleveland is now facing the Redskins defense, who has been gutted by runs inside their own territory so far this year, I think that's going to bode extremely well for the Browns. I also love the fact that Hugh Jackson is willing to do all types of different things offensively, pull out tricks, pull out prior, run, throwing the ball, do whatever it takes to try to produce points in this game. So I think that that's going to be a benefit. Now we know where Josh Norman's going to be. Now we have an offense that's willing to adjust itself. We've got nothing to lose. We almost won our last game. Let's just go ahead and throw it all out there. This is not a team in our own division. They don't know us all that well. Let's just lay the chips down and see what happens and play aggressively. And so I generally think that is what's going to happen. I think we're going to see a very efficient offensive performance by Kirk Cousins, targeting a lot of receivers, but feeding off of Jordan Reed's success. And I think that we're going to see a very balanced approach from the Cleveland Browns, where they will have some success running the football. And I think there is a good reason why this total opened at 45.5 and is now pushing 47. I think we could see some points in this one. Let me ask you one question about the Browns' defense overall in terms of I know that they've got, I think it's Tramon Williams is injured, and he's not going to play in this game. And he was injured last week, right? He was injured last game, and so now he's downgraded to doubtful for this game, I believe. Do we know yet what Joe Hayden might do?
He's questionable, and I think that he may be limited in the game. Again, they're trying to they're looking at young players, and also when Joe Hayden was in there and at 100%, he gave up a touchdown pass to Nelson Aguilar, who has been bad in the NFL. He gave up a long touchdown to Nelson Aguilar in week 1. So I'm not even sure that he's very good anymore.
Right. No, I'm not sure he is either. And so I think that there's going to be opportunities to exploit there. And you already mentioned the injuries in the Washington Redskins secondary, and I think both those injuries should be a concern to both defenses. And the balance that I think we'll see from both offenses will lead to better success passing the ball. I think some of these teams, weeks 1 and 2, and we'll talk about, some teams here that started out really pass heavy like the Redskins, and then they realize this is actually pretty inefficient. It's okay to be a little bit more pass heavy if that's where our weaponry is, but we can't be 74, 75%. And we really saw week 3, 2 of the teams that started off ridiculous pass heavy, the Bengals and the Redskins, really toned it down in their week 3 game. And while the Bengals ended up losing, they obviously came out and won in a big way on Thursday Night Football. The Redskins were able to use that strategy to let Kirk Cousins feel a little bit more comfortable in the pocket, the whole pressure is not on him, even though the run game wasn't extremely successful. They still were able to use that to Kirk's advantage from the perspective that he didn't feel like he had to carry the whole burden of the team's performance, and he had more opportunities to pass the ball where the defense didn't know as a run or a pass going to come. I mentioned the metric before. Through 2 weeks, I think they had 18 or 19 third downs, and they passed the ball on every single one of them except for one. That's no way to quarterback a team and have success if the defense knows exactly what you're doing every single time it's third down that you're going to have to pass. Speaking of passing, let's move on to a game, in a divisional game in Atlanta, where Carolina goes with a losing record into Atlanta, the team that, broke their win streak last season. Did I say Tampa? Obviously, I'm in Atlanta. If I said Tampa, I'm not sure. But they're going down to Atlanta, and Atlanta broke their win streak last year. We know a little bit about Cam, and we know what Cam does well, what he doesn't do well. We know when he plays well and when he doesn't play well. So tell us, Evan, is this a game that Cam should play well, and why?
Yeah, so we know that Cam will just eat you up if you can't put pressure on him. And then every once in a while, he'll face a defense, whether it be Denver in the Super Bowl or Minnesota last week, that gets a lot of pressure on him, and he'll kind of melt down. So I mean that happens to any quarterback, but that's the way that you get to Cam Newton. And last week, I mean, the Vikings sacked him 8 times. They had 12 quarterback hits. Like they dominated that game. But now, I mean, it's going from one extreme to the other, because the Falcons don't generate any pass rush. They're 31st in sacks right now. They are 27th in the NFL in quarterback hits. They don't really have a pass rusher. They try to draft Vic Beasley, but with a top 5 pick a couple of years ago, but they've already moved him to linebacker. He's not a guy who rushes the passer all the time anymore. The Falcons have allowed a league high 10 touchdown passes. The first 3 opponents to face the Falcons this season, Jameis Winston finishes the number 5 overall fantasy quarterback. Derek Carr finishes the number 3 overall fantasy quarterback. And Drew Brees finishes the number 3 overall fantasy quarterback. And now they're facing Cam Newton. So this is trouble. And I think that if you're going to look at Cam Newton in daily fantasy, which you probably should, the guy to play him with is Greg Olsen. The Falcons last year, I've noticed that cover 3 defenses tend to struggle against tight ends. It used to be like Tampa 2 defenses struggled against tight ends, like Lovie Smith's defense. You could always attack him, but with tight ends. But fewer teams play that Tampa 2 now, and cover 3 is the coverage that is in vogue. And it started with Seattle. Seattle has great personnel, but they've long kind of struggled to defend tight ends. That's the way that you could get after them. The Falcons, their coach Dan Quinn comes from the Pete Carroll tree, and they are getting smashed by tight ends. They gave up 5 catches for 64 yards to Bucs tight ends in week 1. They gave up 10 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown to the Raiders tight ends in week 2. And then last week, Coby Fleener didn't do anything. In the first 2 games, all of a sudden, he goes for over 109 yards and a touchdown. So this is a great matchup for Greg Olsen. And we're going to see Desmond Trufant, the Falcons' top cornerback, on Kelvin Benjamin, who was held to 0 catches on 1 target last week. I mean, Kelvin Benjamin is going to be more active than that, but Desmond Trufant's a really good corner. So I think that Cam to Olsen could have a lot of success. And I think that one guy who hasn't done a whole lot early in the season, but he started to get a little bit more action last week, is Ted Ginn. And I mean, this dude, we know that this dude has major big play ability. And with Desmond Trufant on Kelvin Benjamin, that means that Robert Alford, who's kind of like a risk-taking cornerback, he is going to be matched up with Ted Ginn. Ted Ginn burned Robert Alford a bunch last year, and Pro Football Focus has charged Ted Ginn or Robert Alford with 2 touchdowns allowed through 3 games and the 10th most receiving yards allowed in the NFL. So I think that there are some definite edges there for the Panthers passing game. And then also the Falcons have allowed 28 receptions to running backs through 3 games. Last year, the Falcons allowed the most receptions in the NFL to opposing running backs. So this is not just a small sample thing. It dates well back into last season, and I think we might see Fozzie Whitaker make a couple plays in the passing game against Atlanta.
Excellent. Yeah. Now I'm going to build on what you just mentioned, and people can kind of, I think, go to while I'm telling you this. What I want you to do: go to sharpfootballstats.com if you are sitting at your computer, and if you're not, check this out later, because this is exactly what Evan was talking about, but it's really going to stand out to you visually. If you go to Sharp Football Stats, there's a tab for offense right there on the homepage. Scroll all the way down to Strength of Schedule. When you hit Strength of Schedule, you're going to see some graphics pop up. Choose the Carolina Panthers as the team from the drop-down, and choose to visualize the opponent's rank in pass efficiency defense. And when you do that, what you are going to see is you're going to see that week 1, they played the 6th-rated pass defense of the Broncos. Week 2, surprisingly enough, they played the 9th-rated pass defense of the 49ers. Week 3, they played the 4th-rated pass defense of the Minnesota Vikings. Now they play the 31st-rated pass defense of the Atlanta Falcons. Take it one step further. From the drop-down, instead this time choose pass protection efficiency defense. Now we're going to look at the numbers Evan just mentioned about sack rate. We're going to see that he has faced, in 2 of the last 3 weeks, the number 1 and the number 2 most pass rush efficient teams in the NFL in the Minnesota Vikings and the Denver Broncos. Against the San Francisco 49ers, who ranked 19th, Cam Newton passed for over 350 yards, a 112 rating. They made 5 trips into the red zone and put up 46 points. That was against the 19th rated pass defense, who also pass rush defense, who happened to be 9th rated overall in pass efficiency defense. Now they face the defense who's 31st in both metrics. Now, I guess one key thing that we have to discuss is the simple fact that the Atlanta Falcons obviously have played some decent competition themselves. They've played the New Orleans Saints, they've played the Oakland Raiders, and these are teams that are capable of throwing the football down the field and producing points. So while we can take that with a slight grain of salt, we also want to talk about the week that Jameis Winston had against this defense to provide a little bit of context, because Jameis, I was on the Bucs week 1, and I think you also believe that there was a good chance the Bucs could win that game. But Jameis really stepped up and dominated, and we did not see that from Jameis in Arizona really week 2 at all, nor did we really see it a whole lot, even though they produced a ton of points against the Rams last week. So Jameis had an awesome day against this Atlanta Falcons in this very same building. So I really do believe that this could be a very good game for Cam to bounce back. There's a couple other reasons, obviously, to think that this game could go well for the Carolina Panthers offense. You mentioned a couple of them, but here's the big question. What's going on with Cam's ankle? We know that he got his ankle injured against the Vikings a little bit. He really, I was talking to you about this before we started press record. He really tries to play this like Joe Cool type character, even in the face of adversity, even when he's down. And, you put a guy, I don't even care who it is, stick Aaron Rodgers there, and granted, I'm going to list some great quarterbacks, of course. Stick Aaron Rodgers there. Stick Tom Brady there. Stick Peyton Manning when he's there. Even stick like a Drew Brees or any of these guys. When they're down in the fourth quarter, they're going to be clapping their hands, Phillip Rivers, clapping their hands crazy, going buck wild behind center, trying to get the snap off quickly, trying to get his team hurried up to the line of scrimmage, running all around. And Cam is like sitting there with his Monopoly Man hat on, like cool catting it up to the line of scrimmage, like I got this. Like there really did not seem to be that much of a sense of urgency in his game. And I want to kind of say this, and maybe you disagree, I don't know, but he seems to be somewhat of a front runner from that perspective, in my opinion, from some of the stuff that I've seen. When things are going great, Cam's party time, and we'll keep rolling up the score if we can. If things are going bad, then he's kind of, we saw it after the Super Bowl. He's kind of going to try to just slowly do his thing and try to deflect whatever needs to be deflected. But he is not going to be that guy getting all animated trying to get his team to win this game as like urgently as possible. So hopefully in Atlanta, where I think Carolina should be able to produce enough offensively, that we won't really see this kind of strange Cam where he's getting hit and he's getting rattled and he wants to put his Monopoly hat on and, kind of pull out a cape and kind of cower behind the offensive line. The question that I have in this game, though, Evan, for you, is what are we going to get from the Atlanta Falcons offense? We know that the Atlanta Falcons ran for 7 yards per carry last week against the New Orleans Saints defense. We know that they ran for 4.8 yards per carry in the prior week. We know that they have looked great offensively and are producing a tremendous rate. The problem is we also know that they have not run for 4 yards per carry at all against this Panthers defense any of the last several years in any of their matchups. They really have struggled overall against the Carolina Panthers. The one thing that I will say that hopefully can work in their favor in this game is the simple fact that many of their games are late in the season. And by that point in time, unfortunately, as Falcons fans can probably attest to, that offensive line gets beat up and battered. And many times they're playing with backups by the time they get to facing Carolina in week 14 and then in week 16 or week 11 and week 15. They're playing these guys late in the year, and they're sometimes playing with a beat-up offensive line. Ryan's line is strong, has looked pretty well so far this year, and Carolina is probably as vulnerable as a secondary as they've come to Atlanta in the last several of years. So Talk to me a little bit about Atlanta's offense and where we think Atlanta could possibly exploit this Panthers defense to keep the pressure on Cam Newton.
So the Panthers have, first of all, we know that they have a great linebacker core. It is one of the best in the NFL. You mentioned to me before the show how the Falcons historically have really struggled to run the ball against the Panthers. And I think that one reason for that is because the Falcons run a lot of outside zone, and the Panthers match up really well against an outside zone scheme because they have so much speed at linebacker. I mean, their linebackers are Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis, who was a safety at Georgia, and somehow is still one of the fastest linebackers in the NFL after tearing his ACL 3 times. Just an incredible story. But and then their other linebacker, Shaq Thompson, who played running back a bunch at UCLA. So they're really well equipped to defend an outside zone running scheme. So I don't think that the Falcons are going to have a whole lot of rushing success in this game. But we have not seen the Panthers' pass defense stressed very much so far. I mean, in week 1, I know Trevor Siemian's your boy, Warren, and he's definitely played above expectation so far, proving me wrong.
Siemian is boy wonder for me. He's like the little sidekick that nobody expects is actually going to do anything. Right. He's not going to steal the show now. He's not going to take Batman's cape and mask and, steal Batgirl or whatever. But he is going to be efficient with what he does, and so that's he is the little boy wonder in my opinion.
So the Panthers have faced Trevor Siemian, Blaine Gabbert, and Sam Bradford in their first 3 games. So they haven't really been tested very much by opposing quarterbacks. I mean, I think that Sam Bradford is okay. He's probably in that 20 to 28 range among quarterbacks. I'm still kind of the opinion that Trevor Siemian is in that group too, and then Blaine Gabbert is definitely in the 29 to 32 range. And now they're facing Matt Ryan, who, I think over the course of the career, he's probably proven to be like in the 14 to 18 range. But, this year so far, and against some pretty weak opponents, you mentioned them earlier, but I mean, he's looked like a top 10 guy so far this year, and that's without, Julio even really blowing it up yet. That's with Mohamed Sanu missing a little bit of time with a couple of injuries. And we have not seen that this Panthers pass defense tested, and there have been moments where it's looked bad. I mean, they gave up a 75-yard touchdown to Vance McDonald in the second game, and they're not getting a lot of help up front. Where right now they're 15th in sacks and 27th in quarterback hits, and their best defensive end, Charles Johnson, was unable to practice on Friday with a quadricep injury. So usually guys that don't practice on Friday don't play. Charles Johnson could be different, but either way, he's banged up. I think that without the likely aid of a running game in this game, I think that Matt Ryan will be the likeliest source of the Falcons generating offense, and I think that we see a bounce back game for Julio Jones after he was pretty quiet on Monday night in a game that Atlanta just really dominated with their rushing attack. And Atlanta has a good offensive line. I mean, they've put together a good offensive line. They went out and signed Alex Mack. They got Jake Matthews. They found this kid Ryan Schrader at right tackle. He's been really good for them. So I think that the likeliest means of the Falcons generating offense will be via the passing game, and I think that they will have success. And I think that if you are going to one strategy in daily fantasy is to game stack, to stack a game. And if the game shoots out and you have the right pieces in that game, you put yourself in a really good position. And I think that if you build a lineup with Cam Newton and Greg Olsen in it, I think that for the Panthers, those guys have the best matchups. And you come back with Julio Jones, and this game goes 34 to 27. I think that you have the likeliest pieces of the game that could have big box score production.
Yeah, and you talked about Matt Ryan and what he could do, and you talked about the quarterbacking that the Carolina Panthers have faced from their opposition. I mean, the benefit for them is they're very familiar with what Matt Ryan does and what he likes to do. Hopefully Kyle Shanahan, interesting, we talked about this, I think, earlier in the week. Last year was his first year with the offense, and so oftentimes you come in your first year, you think you're going to attack Carolina this way. They got a great defense. They got Josh Norman. It doesn't work out. You had never had experience going up against them before. Hopefully, Shanahan spent some time this past off season figuring out what he was going to do to give more success offensively against the Carolina Panthers. Now he gets to catch them early on in the season with a healthy offensive line and get some of those plans that he scribbled down on napkins at the McDonald's restaurant into place and into operation. One thing that you definitely mentioned, the offensive efficiency of their opponents. You talked about their quarterbacks. Well, even look at their overall offensive efficiency year to date. The Denver Broncos ranked 10th, the 49ers ranked 28th, and the Vikings ranked 24th in offensive efficiency right now, the Falcons overall. Ranked second. So this is a team that hopefully will be able to test this defense and put pressure on the defense. One thing that I think was important from the Sharp Football Show on Monday night on Periscope was me breaking down what Bradford did first half versus second half. The first at halftime, the Vikings were down. Their only score in that first half was a punt return, I believe it was, that they housed. So Sam Bradford in the first half, one of his 13 pass attempts went for a first down, just one, and he had averaged 0.6 yards per pass attempt. In the second half, on the road in Carolina, Sam Bradford just put the team starting for just his second game, 8.5 yards per attempt. 10 of his 17 passes went for first down, and he posted a perfect passer rating in the third quarter, 4-4, 158.3 rating, 14.8 yards per attempt, and every single one of his passes went for a first down. So this, if Bradford can do that on the road in one half in Carolina, I have a feeling that, Matt Ryan, as long as he's protected and as long as he has some healthy receivers out there, they can probably produce. Now, that's where I'm going to turn to you again and ask you, before we even talk about Julio, tell me about Sanu, who obviously got injured and banged up, had to go to the locker room, I think, at some point in the game on Monday night. What is his health status?
Yeah, both of those guys have been banged up a little bit early in the season, but neither of them, they both practiced fully today or on Friday, and neither of them is even on the injury report anymore. So they're good to go.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, that kind of covers the things that I wanted to talk about this game. Let's move on to our third game, and this is a game where there might not be as much fantasy intrigue here across a number of players as we talked about in the first game, but it's going to be a really interesting game to watch and to see how things go, because we're talking about the Dallas Cowboys traveling out to San Francisco out on the West Coast, where they actually, Oxnard, California, they do a lot of their training camps out there, and so their fame out there probably is pretty decent, I would guess, and they're looking to take on the San Francisco 49ers. So these teams obviously don't play nearly as much anymore. They used to meet each other all the time in the postseason. Very vicious, rivalry between these two teams, and I don't think we're going to see that same type of excellence exhibited in this competition on Sunday afternoon. But it still is going to be interesting to see this matchup, and I think this is going to be another one where we can talk about difference in competition and some of the things that we're going to get a chance to see from Sharp Football Stats, when we're analyzing the strength of schedule of these two teams, what they faced year to date. But go ahead and break this one down for me and give me some reasons why we could see San Francisco give Dallas a fight, because obviously San Francisco 1-2 has got their clocks cleaned the last week, and a lot of people are probably really down on this team. They've been down on this team all year long. They were down on this team from the very beginning. Suddenly, boom, their socks were they were shocked week one when they saw them pace the Rams, and then they went on to obviously get crushed the next 2 weeks. How does San Francisco win this game? What's their blueprint in your opinion?
Well, so we have Dallas coming off of the big Monday night, or was it Sunday? Yeah, Sunday night, national TV beatdown of the Bears, at home. And now going out to San Francisco, where, the 49ers have played excellent defense since the start. I mean, league best defense in home games. They've allowed the fewest points since the start of the 2015 season. They've allowed 15 points per game in home games since the start of last year. That's the lowest average in the NFL during that span, whereas they've allowed 33.5 points at home. I'm sorry, in road games over that span, which is the worst average in the NFL, which is just a crazy, crazy split. And I mean, it's in a big enough sample size at this point that, I mean, I think you got to take it somewhat seriously. I'm sure that it'll start to fade at some point, but this team gets up to play at home, and I don't know if Dallas is going to take this game particularly seriously. They had some locker room issues this week with Des Bryant. He's supposed to be a leader on that team, and he's not showing up for team meetings and MRI, and he's not going to play. And, it's going to be left up to the rookies on the road, Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott. So, some interesting dynamics there. The 49ers, it was kind of funny how they how they approached last week's game, because they had zero rushing success in the first three quarters. I mean, Carlos Hyde was at like 12 carries for 34 yards or something through three quarters, and the Seahawks, up I think it was like 33-3 or something, or 37-3. They went into prevent, and Chip Kelly put his foot on the gas and was just running the ball down the Seahawks prevent defense down their throat in the fourth quarter, kind of like using it as an opportunity to jumpstart his running game. I think they're going to be able to run the ball on the Cowboys, who in the first 3 weeks faced three of the worst run offenses in the NFL, the Giants, the Bears, and the Redskins. And the Cowboys, who are really, really weak from a personnel standpoint in the front seven, gave up over 4.9 yards per carry, one of the worst averages in football to start the year. I think the 49ers win this game. What do you think, Warren? Because it seems like there has already start to be a little bit of movement on the line, which opened at 3 in favor of Dallas. Do you think that it could be bet enough that the 49ers are favored by kickoff?
Well, now that it's down to 2, it is possible. It depends how large of a move this would be in terms of, how big of an open order is put on the San Francisco 49ers in terms of buy anything. Obviously, there's a strategy amongst groups. There's no rush at this very moment to do this, but, once this thing gets close, and they don't want to take the +1, so let's just say they were taking +2, they took +3. At this kind of point in time, what a lot of them are going to do is they're going to tease this number up through the 3, up through the 7, and they're going to get on San Francisco that way. They're going to get exposure to San Francisco using a teaser, which obviously then they have to pair a second leg to another team that's going to play in a totally different game, catching 6 or 7 points. But they're going to try to do whatever they can to get San Francisco at the best value that's possible. So it all really, truthfully, all depends on how big of a move they want to do. But certainly, I mean, if this was like a massive one for them, this game would close San Francisco as a small favorite. But it is clear right now that San Francisco is the sharper side to this game. That's a lot of times, and actually we wanted to do this week. I think what we will do next week, Evan, is I'm going to try to incorporate Bill Krackenberger, the professional bettor. I want him to come on this podcast. He comes on my podcast. I literally talk to him 5 times a day or more during the season, every single day of the week, because we work together on a lot of things. But I want him to come on this podcast and talk on the phone with you and I together, maybe next Friday, and talk about the screen, talk about setups and things like that. This game is not being set up as far as I know. This game is being, the money that's coming in on San Francisco is real, and that is the position. So when we're talking about how San Francisco could win this game and how San Francisco could excel in the spot, I think you're 100% correct. We have to look first at the running attack. We know that that was one of the keys to success for the Eagles when they had mediocre quarterback play at times, was to get the run game jump started. And we also know that the Dallas Cowboys, what do they love to do? They love to possess the ball. They love to run the ball as well. Especially with Dez not being there and Dak playing on the road, they would like to be able to have that time of possession. If the 49ers are able to stay out on the field a little bit longer than normal, even though they're operating at warp speed, and run the ball effectively against this Cowboys defense, I think that would really set back the Cowboys defense immensely. And the other thing, too, is it would give that 49ers defense even more time to rest and prepare for this offense. Look, the Cowboys, they actually ranked 23rd in a metric that I'm now using this year that I kind of created called one-score run defense. And basically what one score does is it looks at successful play rate when the game is within 1 score and dropping out fourth quarter. Obviously, at times you're up by 4 points, 7 points in the fourth quarter, and you're going to play a little bit differently because the game's almost over. You're not going to be as aggressive or whatnot. So try to basically eliminate garbage time or time when teams are going to go out of what their normal game plan would be, and focus on those metrics. And so they do rank pretty poorly in terms of a run defense from that perspective. The other thing, too, is it's important to look at what the 49ers have faced. And when you look at what the 49ers have faced in terms of defensive efficiency, I mean, you're not going to find a much more difficult schedule than this. And we talked about this in the pieces I did for you guys over at Roto World before the season started. They played the number 1, number 6, and number 12 rated overall defenses so far. They played the number 12 defense at home to start the season. They then go on the road out to all the way across the country, early start against the Carolina Panthers. Then they have to go up to Seattle on the road and face that defense. I mean, you're not going to – both of those teams back-to-back weeks on the road is going to be extremely difficult for any offense, let alone an offense trying a brand-new scheme, a totally different system than what they've done in the past. It's just going to be extremely difficult to do that. And, you know, the last time that they played a team that they could run the ball on, that they had, you know, they didn't have the greatest run defense, because the reality is Seattle and Carolina top 5 run defenses. The Rams were 24th. Now we're talking about a Cowboys team that's sort of in that same ballpark. Week 1, when the 49ers played at home, same place they're playing right now, against a bad run defense, 24th, they crushed the Rams, as we remember. They ran for 150 yards in that game. They gained 28 first downs, which was the most in the entire NFL that week, because their defense wouldn't allow the Rams offense to do anything. They got extremely inefficient performance from Blaine Gabbert, even though he only threw the ball for 4.9 yards per attempt. They still got those 28 first downs. They went 4 times into the red zone, converted all 4 trips. I'm not saying all that stuff is going to be duplicated in this very matchup, but the point being that it's going to be important for them to run the ball and get that established, and I think that there's the opportunity that they can get that done here. And then on the flip side, you know, obviously you got to stop the run against the Dallas Cowboys. That's first and foremost. Force Dak, the rookie, has been playing great, but he doesn't have Dez. He's going to be throwing a lot of short passes, and try to make him beat you the hard way, which is efficiently moving the ball up the field. The one thing that the 49ers cannot allow are these huge chunk plays that are going to flip momentum. Make Dak be perfect marching the ball up the field against you. No interceptions, no third down incompletions. You know, make him do those difficult things and progress the ball up the field in a road game against an uncommon opponent that he doesn't really know quite as well. So that's kind of my blueprint for the 49ers. What do you think? Do you think that is what is Dak going to do from how is he going to take advantage of the fact, without Dez, of the fact that isn't the slot corner for the 49ers out this week? Am I correct in that?
Yes, Jimmy Ward.
Jimmy Ward. So talk to me about that matchup now that Jimmy Ward's out and Dak's love and close relationship with Beasley.
Yeah, Cole Beasley should get a ton of work in this game. I mean, he already leads the Cowboys in targets. Now you remove Dez. You know, you remove the 49ers slot corner Jimmy Ward, who Pro Football Focus had rated as clearly the 49ers' best corner through 3 games. So the game sets up really, really well for Cole Beasley, especially if the 49ers are able to have rushing success and score points against the Cowboys, which I think that there's a decent chance that they will be able to do that. And then you get Dak into situations where he needs to make throws, and it's clear that his most trusted target at this point is Cole Beasley. One thing I wanted to add was that I think that Blaine Gabbert actually can have a decent game here. The Cowboys gave up over 300 yards to Kirk Cousins in week 2. They gave up over 300 yards to Brian Hoyer in week 3. They gave up 3 touchdown passes to Eli Manning in week 1. They generated 0 sacks against Brian Hoyer on 50 dropbacks last week. They just do not have – Rod Marinelli is a great, great defensive coordinator, and it's possible that he's just that good of a coordinator that he makes Gabbert look bad. But the Cowboys just do not have players on defense. And I think that this is a situation where Gabbert can be okay because he won't be under a lot of duress. And he can complete some passes to Jeremy Curley. And, he will have the benefit of what should be an efficient rushing attack. And he himself, Blaine Gabbert ranks second among quarterbacks right now in rushing attempts behind Cam Newton. I don't think he's going to have like a big fantasy day necessarily, but I think that he can have a more efficient performance than usual, and just because of the nature of the opponent. And I think that would bode well for a 49ers upset win as well.
Yeah, and you obviously have to look at what, quarterbacks who can run are able to do against this defense. And last year, they don't really face him all that much playing in the NFC East. You got Eli Manning, now you got Kirk Cousins, and of course, whoever happens to be the quarterback in Philadelphia, which in this case, Wentz can move the ball a little bit with his legs, of course, but, prior quarterbacks, whether it's Bradford or whatnot, you have to go back to like Vic a couple of years ago where they were able to actually do that. Last season, Carolina was able to run, Cam Newton, they put up 33 points when Aaron Rodgers was able to move around. He had a lot of success, and the Packers put up 28 points. I mean, granted, and no point in talking too much about the defense last year because their offense was so inept. But so far this year, the Dallas Cowboys have so far played Eli Manning, a pocket quarterback, Kirk Cousins, a pocket quarterback, and, the Chicago Bears, who trotted out, what was it? The name is Brian Hoyer, who can move a little bit, but certainly not like Gabbert. I mean, Gabbert has a lot of top end speed if he does get going. So, and he will run a little bit more frequently than Hoyer, who kind of will only run if like he's scared in the pocket, and then he'll just try to take off. Gabbert obviously has had steer issues in the past, but they do use him a little bit more on design stuff as well. So let's now head into our last matchup that we're going to discuss, and this is a pretty intriguing matchup here because there's a lot to unpack in this one, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday night taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And what we saw last week was two very one-sided games between both of these teams and their opponents. We saw the Pittsburgh Steelers get completely lit up. Their offense was completely inept. The defense of the Philadelphia Eagles, behind Jim Schwartz, just totally shut this offense down. And then conversely, we saw the Kansas City Chiefs go up against one of the most laughable performances of the season, I think, by any quarterback. To throw one interception in the first half and be trailing in that game and then think that they're going to get back in it and have Fitzpatrick just chuck the ball. He threw 5 more interceptions in the second half, 3 of which came inside of the red zone. And if I'm not mistaken, and I'm looking it up right now, I believe that the Chiefs actually, in terms of pass rush in that game, did not record a single sack. So it's not as if he was getting hit left and right and his passes were wobbling and he was getting under so much duress that he was just chucking the ball, at ill-advised times. This guy had no sacks. He had a clean sheet from his offensive line in terms of sacks, and yet he threw a ridiculous 6 interceptions, including 3 inside the red zone. I think those things do play into this game, but as we've been doing so far in this podcast, I'll let you take the first shot into digging into this game. Talk to me a little bit about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that's the biggest intrigue here. And how are they going to reincorporate Le'Veon Bell? They're obviously, I think, without their slot wide receiver, who is not going to play due to injury in this game. How are they going to incorporate Le'Veon back into this offense? What do you think this offense is going to look like? And where are some of the matchup edges that they'll have in this game against the Chiefs defense?
Yeah, it's Ryan Fitzpatrick. He went to Harvard, but he plays like he doesn't play like a Harvard alum. At times, he always throws a few to the other team, and sometimes they don't catch them all. Sometimes they don't catch any. But last week they caught them all.
He's the type of guy that you would have, like you would expect, like the guy who did go to Harvard. He's got the book smarts, but yet there's a fight out in the quad. And do you want Ryan Fitzpatrick to have your back, or do you want the guy who's at the gym instead of reading his book, who hangs out with the bikers instead of hanging out with the math club? I think it's pretty obvious. And so in this particular case, like Fitzpatrick, he's got those street smarts, but you stick him in the battle, the heat of the battle, and he just starts throwing wild haymakers. He doesn't really have a strategy. He's just like, get back off of me, and he's just like flinging it. And that's kind of that's what we see out on Sundays. When he gets down, he's just chucking it.
As for the Steelers offense, so the Steelers, I guess they're 2-1. They've had some pretty good offensive performances, not against Philadelphia on the road. Ben actually has crazy home road splits over since the beginning of 2014. He's averaged 342 passing yards since the beginning of 2014 at home with a 42-13 touchdown to interception ratio, whereas during that same time period, that 342-yard average drops to 286 in road games, and the touchdown interception ratio goes from 42 to 13 all the way down to 17 to 16. So crazy home road splits there for Ben, and we saw a little bit more of that in Philadelphia. Now Ben returns home, and coming off that tough road loss against the Chiefs defense that again has not really been tested. In Week 1, they did face a good quarterback, Phillip Rivers, who moved the ball at will at Arrowhead in the first half until Keenan Allen got hurt. And then Phillip Rivers did not end up with a big fantasy day because Melvin Gordon had 2 goal line touchdowns. But, that was a game that went to overtime. Chargers had a lot of offensive success. Past 2 weeks, the Chiefs faced Brock Osweiler and meltdown Ryan Fitzpatrick. And now the Chiefs are going to face Ben Roethlisberger at Heinz Field, where he has been lethal, with Le'Veon Bell coming back, with the Chiefs' right cornerback opposite Marcus Peters listed as questionable with a knee injury, with Marcus Peters having missed a bunch of practice time this week due to the flu. And the Chiefs have not played really well on defense from an efficiency standpoint. They've given up 4.3 yards per carry to opposing running backs. That is below league average. And they haven't gotten a lot of pressure on the quarterback either, with no Justin Houston, with Tamba Hali not a full-time player anymore. They have the 8th fewest quarterback hits in the NFL, and they have the 2nd fewest sacks in the NFL. And I think that Big Ben, who, the Steelers love to play fast at home, play with a lot of tempo, put their foot on the gas, play no huddle. I think that Ben has a chance at a really big game in this one. And I also, Le'Veon Bell, one thing they talked about this week was that D'Angelo Williams will remain a part of the offense, but Le'Veon Bell will be used extensively as a receiver, which makes a lot of sense because beyond Antonio Brown, the Steelers haven't gotten anything from their pass catchers. I mean, Jesse James is blocking on most of the snaps at this point, the big tight end. Marcus Wheaton comes back from a shoulder injury last week, and he's still banged up. He has 3 drop passes. They bench him. Then they got to bring him back because Eli Rogers suffers turf toe during the game. Eli Rogers has been ruled out this week. Sammy Coates is good for a long reception per game, but that's about it. I mean, he's like a poor man's Torrey Smith. Just a complete one-trick guy. So I think that we see Le'Veon come out and be fed in the passing game like 5 to 8 receptions right away, and he's a huge part of their passing game. And I like the other side too. I really like the way that the game matches up for Alex Smith, who, I mean, people don't really think of him as a big-time fantasy quarterback, and he's not. But I think that he can have success in this game because, the Steelers are another team. They have the worst pass rush in football. We think of them historically as like Blitzburg, but they don't blitz anymore. Mike Tomlin has like Tony Dungy roots, and they're playing cover 2 defense, and they're not blitzing at all. And they're trying to make the opponent have long drives and bait them into making mistakes on 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 play drives. But they're giving up a ton of yardage. I mean, the Steelers have given up over 300 passing yards in each of their first 3 games. They do play pretty good run defense, although they had some issues in the second half of last week's game where Wendell Smallwood had some nice runs against them and Kenyon Barner. But for the most part, they do play pretty good run defense. So I think that this is a game where Ben is going to be able to put his foot on the gas, and the Chiefs are going to have to respond. And ideally, the Chiefs, they like to play slow and conservative, but when they are put in situations where they have to play more aggressively, I mean, they will. And we've seen Alex Smith have fairly consistent success in those kind of situations. And then if you look at the injury situations for the Steelers, they are not going to have Ryan Shazier, who's their stud pass coverage inside linebacker. He played a big role in holding Jordan Reed to 64 yards on 7 catches when they played in week 1. He's out with a knee injury. Their strong safety, Robert Golden, he's out with a hamstring injury. And then their slot corner, Sean Davis, who has struggled when healthy, he missed a bunch of practice time this week with a back injury. Does look like he's going to play. But, I mean, they all those guys play up the middle. And that's where Travis Kelce runs a lot of his routes. And Jeremy Maclin, too. I mean, Jeremy Maclin this year is running 60% of his routes in the slot. And that's where Alex Smith likes to throw the ball the best, is inside the numbers. And so I think that Alex Smith will be able to kind of pick apart this Steelers defense that doesn't get any pass rush, and is willing to give up catches in short areas and is shorthanded in the middle of the field. I think that Kelce, Maclin, and Alex Smith all have a chance at a big game. And also, we've seen the Steelers have a lot of problems in their last 2 games against receiving backs. Giovanni Bernard had a huge game against them in week 2, and then Darren Sproles had a big game against them in week 3, and Spencer Ware right now leads all running backs in receiving yards. So I like the over in this game. I think that there are a lot of edges on both sides. I'm really excited to watch the game. I want to have a lot of DFS exposure to the game. And I mean, I think it's going to be a great way to cap off, an exciting Sunday.
Yeah, and you alluded to the Steelers no longer being this Blitzburg style of defense, and what they are is more like Ritzburg because they crack, and they've got tons of cracks, and they're like the Ritz crackers. And the problem is this defense got completely obliterated by the Philadelphia Eagles last week. And in that second half, when Philadelphia scored 21 unanswered, they didn't even have to throw a single pass in Steelers territory. They were getting it done by, like you just mentioned, yards after the catch. They were getting it done by a run game that generated 6.6 yards per carry when they touched the ball inside Pittsburgh Steelers territory. So this is absolutely a defense that had problems before losing those defensive assets, and now will certainly have problems after losing them. And so that's going to be a big issue to me. You mentioned the pass rush, and I think one of the interesting elements here for the pass rush, and before I get into that real quick, I do want to mention, because I just pulled it up on sharpfootballstats.com, that the Pittsburgh Steelers so far this year rank 27th in success rate when the opposing running back is targeted. 56% of passes to opposing running backs have graded out successfully this year. So it definitely is a defense that has been susceptible to that. And like you mentioned, Spencer Ware should have an efficient day. When you talk about what Kansas City has gone up against, so far Kansas City has gone up against the number 1 pass rush defense the number 16 pass rush defense in San Diego Chargers. That's where they rank this year. The number 3 pass rush defense in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback and sacking them in the Houston Texans week 2. And week 3, they played the number 5 pass rush defense in the New York Jets. Now they play the NFL's worst, as you alluded to. And that's going to give Alex Smith more opportunities. The other interesting element here for Alex Smith is when you can't bring pressure on him, like when you're unsuccessful, if you do try to blitz, if you do try anything different, Alex Smith with those offensive players running down the field and defensive players, sending a blitz and covering man-to-man if they're doing that in protection with their backs to Alex Smith, he can very easily roll out of there if he's able to and gain 15 to 25 yards in a clip without even being touched and slide down. And it would not surprise me at all if this pass rush is not getting to him, if he is able to take a pause from his dink and dunk yak that he's going to be eating and go ahead and try to run the ball a little bit on some of these broken plays and have big, explosive play type game-changing ability when he's doing that and get some chunk yardage in doing that. So that's something definitely to look for in my opinion here. You mentioned right now I've been talking about the Chiefs offense and what I think they could potentially do against the Steelers defense. Switching to talking about the Steelers offense against the Chiefs defense, we just mentioned, the Chiefs can't bring pressure. The Steelers just went up against the number 4 pass rush defense in the Philadelphia Eagles. Now they play the number 30th team in the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs actually, I think if you look at them, you might be scared about this game from a Steelers fan's perspective, because you see the Chiefs and they allowed 21 points to the Chargers in the first half of their game in week 1. 21 points in the first half. The last 10 quarters, 2.5 full games, the Chiefs allowed 28 points. Okay, so almost identical numbers there to what they allowed in just the first half. So their defense obviously has played a lot better. However, we look at those offenses. Week 2, the Texans made 4 trips into the KC red zone, 0 touchdowns. Week 3, the Jets made 4 trips into the KC red zone, 0 touchdowns. And we know week 1, after losing Keenan Allen, you kind of alluded to it, the Chargers offense just stopped functioning completely at that point. So the thing about it is this the Chiefs playing great red zone defense, but being terrible over the course of the rest of the field because they're allowing 4 trips in every single game to like the offenses of the Houston Texans and the New York Jets? I don't think it's this case that the Chiefs just have this great red zone defense, but they don't have a very good defense the rest of the field. I think that is going to regress a bit in this spot. I think the Steelers are going to have some success. When you have a guy like Le'Veon Bell who can catch the ball out of the backfield, who can run the ball efficiently outside, inside the red zone, and then you've got Ben being able to play off of that to his targets, I think the Steelers finally are going to be able to do something against this Chiefs red zone defense, which really has shut some of these other opponents down year to date. If you look at the red zone play success rate for the Jets and for the Chiefs, the last 2 opponents, the Jets rank 28th and the Texans rank 32nd. You're talking about 2 of the worst teams over the course of the year in success rate of their plays inside the red zone. The Steelers' offense actually ranks 5th. Their pass success rate is 55%. Their run success rate was only 44%. I think you get Le'Veon back, you increase that run rate a little bit, and that's going to only help your pass rate move up a little bit as well. So I do think that there are edges there. Let's face it. I mean, the Steelers offense, you kind of were at the forefront of this, in my opinion, of talking about how important that Martavis Bryant injury really was. And a lot of people talking about the Steelers offense and how explosive it was going to be this upcoming year, and it's going to build off of what they were last year. And, you know, that Martavis Bryant injury really did affect this offense tremendously. And Ben has tried to figure out what to do without Martavis on the outside, without Keith Miller on the inside. And I think over time they're going to figure it out a little bit more. It does not help that the slot receiver is out this week. But I think just Antonio, Le'Veon, and Ben together playing is going to be something that's really going to help this team and really give them a lot of confidence to do what they want to do offensively, to run what tempo they want, have a lot of confidence that they, every single time they snap the ball, can exploit this defense on the other side of the ball. And keep in mind, Todd Haley, former coach in Kansas City, you have to have this feeling that he's going to be trying to do some extra special things in this game. Hopefully for the Steelers, they go the way Todd Haley goes like half the time. Like half the time he calls these wild-ass plays that end up working, and half the time he calls a wild-ass play that's just like the most completely ridiculous play that you should ever attempt in that situation, and it ends up being terrible. So there's a lot of variance there with what he ends up doing, but this offense, I think with Le'Veon back there could be interesting. Any other final notes or comments that you'd like to add to this matchup?
I think that Antonio Brown has a chance at a huge game. Todd Haley is really good about getting AB matched up with the opponent's weakest corner. And also, he runs most of his routes against opposing right cornerbacks. And Marcus Peters, who is the Chiefs' best cornerback, he never moves. He's always at left cornerback. And then, I mentioned earlier that the right cornerback, Phillip Gaines, he is questionable with a knee injury. So I think AB could really, really rip it up. Even if for some reason the Chiefs move Marcus Peters over to his side, which I don't think that they're going to do, I think that Antonio Brown has a huge, huge Sunday night game.
Well, I think we've done a good service diving deep into these four matchups, and we kept it at 4 so we could give you guys a little bit more detail and analysis, some of the analytics behind why we believe what we believe for these matchups. Obviously, these are our best takes of what we think is going to happen, and hopefully it goes pretty similarly to what we anticipate. But out of any of the other matchups, Evan, are there any other plays that stand out to you before we go ahead and end this podcast and let everybody enjoy the rest of their Saturday, setting some of their lineups and getting ready for the games on Sunday? Any other really quick takes in terms of a good player that they might not want to leave off of all their fantasy rosters, the lineups that they're setting? Is there anybody that stands out to you as like a really great spot or a really great value this week at any of the positions?
Yeah, for whatever reason, people aren't talking about LeGarrette Blount this week. You got the Bills coming off that big upset home win against Arizona, and they go to Foxborough this week, and I think they probably get their clocks cleaned because that's just kind of how things go. I mean, Belichick is 11-4 lifetime against Rex Ryan, and Rex Ryan has one of the weakest rosters that he's ever had against Bill Belichick. And I think that the Patriots defense could have a big day too. No Sammy Watkins for the Bills. When the Patriots faced the Bills last year in the first game, Tyrod Taylor had 3 interceptions and took 8 sacks. And then in the second game, he finished as the number 24 quarterback in fantasy. So I like LeGarrette Blount together with the Patriots defense as a correlation play. I also like Lamar Miller this week against the Titans, who gave up a lot of runs in a home game last week, a lot of big runs to DeAndre Washington, and the Texans are coming off of that embarrassing loss in Foxborough, going back home to face a bad team. Everybody, I guess, is sort of counting them out because they just lost J.J. Watt, who wasn't even very good in their first 3 games. I think that if you're looking for another running back defense correlation play, I really like Lamar Miller and the Texans defense against a Titans offense that has yet to score more than 16 points in any of its first 3 games. yeah, I mean, I think that those are two really interesting daily fantasy plays for week 4.
Excellent. Well, that should give the people something to chew on, and hopefully get a few lineups incorporating those guys into the mix. So with that said, from Evan at Evan Silva on Twitter and from rotoworld.com, we will bid you guys a good luck into this week 4. Hope you guys set some great lineups. Hope you guys do well when you're betting on these games. I am on Twitter at SharpFootball. You can follow my website, sharpfootballanalysis.com. You can follow my stats page, sharpfootballstats.com. And hopefully you guys are going to tune into the show on Monday night leading up to the Monday Night Football game from 8 p.m. Eastern to 8:30 Eastern, where we break down everything that we thought happened. Let's look at the analytics behind what actually did happen from week 4. We'll do that on Monday night as we get ready for week 5. With that said, Evan, thanks once again. I hope you have a great rest of the evening here on Friday night, and we'll catch you next week.
Sounds great, man.
All right, and all the rest of you guys, be safe, have a great weekend, and good luck this weekend.